Hey everybody, welcome. Glad to be at Oshkosh 2021, aren't we? How many of you keep saying last year for 2019? Okay, so I have a fabulous helper today. Her name is Ramona, and she's Sky Chick. She has the white hat on. She is somebody that is just an awesome pilot, blogger, adventurer, and traveler. She's worked with Honda for the past 6 years, and she's gone from flying to living more of the RV lifestyle. And so if you do not have a red ticket that says keep this coupon, please raise your hand so that she can get it to you. My California contingent's here. They always win something. So that's your door prize ticket, and yes, you have to be here, you have to be present, so you're gonna have to wait the whole hour to see what wonderful prize you might have won. So I'm glad you're here, and this is a presentation that I've been working on for several months. I don't know if you know, but I'm an AOPA opinion leaders blogger. So I have a monthly article that I write for AOPA. And I decided to do this series as a 6-month series on Into the Alligator's Mouth. That's actually a picture that one of my high school friends took in Florida. So that's a real alligator. Wanted to thank our door prize sponsors. So we have Lightspeed Aviation, Flying Eyes Optics, King Schools, Lift Aviation, and PilotSafety.org. So again, if you don't have a red door prize ticket, make sure to raise your hand so that Sky Chick can, Sky Chick, this front row looks rowdy. So they have to do the back first. But these are people that I love and adore, so you'll have to make sure to get them eventually. Sponsored by Honda. She's going to keep me on the straight and narrow, that's for sure. So today we're going to cover 3 main areas when it comes to the psychology of personal flight minimums. And I'm going to tell you right off that you're going to love some of what I say, and you're not going to like me sometimes. And that's okay, because the most important thing is that we are having a relationship with our personal minimums. So I'm going to talk about it, even that I don't have one, that we're going to talk about putting a ring on it. So with your personal minimums, we're going to put a ring on it. We're going to cover things regarding your aircraft, pilot factors, and also how Mother Nature, the environment, can really needs to be considered when you're making your minimums. So we are going to talk about why do you make minimums? Why do you have personal guidelines for your flying time? Like most relationships, do we fudge on them? Are there times where we cheat? Why you have them written down or why you don't. And then finally, what you hope to never experience again. So you might think, where did that title come from? I was flying, I was kind of doing a turn and burn with my best friend, Pia Bergvitz. She lives in Camarillo. I was going to Camarillo Airport. And so I was dropping her off and kind of turning and burning and coming back to Santa Maria, California, which is my home airport. And I knew that the ceiling was coming down a little bit, but as I was flying towards Santa Maria, the ceiling was lessening and lessening and lessening. And instead of breaking through about 1,000 feet, I was going to be doing a full approach to minimums. And I got to thinking as I was flying, I call myself Sis. So it was like, okay, Sis, what are your minimums about this? What are your personal minimums? Because I could cheat, and I could say, oh, well, my minimums are 500, but it's 400, I'm going to do it anyway. Or I can just get on the ground and promise myself that I was going to figure out the psychology of how we do this. I'm a psychotherapist by trade, 29 years of having a counseling practice in Oregon and in California. No, I can't analyze you all at once. And the most interesting question that I get most is like, hey, can I ask you about my 13-year-old? So anyway, so I decided that, and that's the actual picture of me coming into Santa Maria. And you can tell that I had to go through that and stay in the soup all the way down. So what I did was I started interviewing people. And what I found out is that, and this is the part you're not going to like, you are not special except to your mother. The rules apply to you. The rules apply to me. So when you're considering your minimums, I also want you to know that you are not special. It makes me think about the statistic that came out several years ago now that said that over 70% of pilots thought they were above average. What's the problem with that? So I decided to get my aviation Rolodex. That shows how old I am, right? Because you have to be over 50 to know what a Rolodex is. And I talked to pilots that had only about 150 hours on up to the 20,000 hour pilots. And so male pilots and female pilots. So I had about 13 or so that I interviewed for the article series. Now, if you only remember one thing today, I want it to be this. Realistically, look at your skill level. Realistically, knowing that you're not special other than to your mother, assess and round down. Okay, so yes, promise me that. Let's see that head shaking. It's hot, I know. We're all glowing. So here's some of the questions that I asked these lovely folks. Some of them are in our audience today that I've talked to. I asked them, do you have minimums? If so, did you write them down? If you have them, are they static? Did you write them when you got your private and you haven't updated them since you have your commercial or your ATP? I asked them what they think about when it comes to developing a set of personal minimums, and also if they cheated. So we will have today some pucker factors. I asked each pilot for a pucker factor. As you can imagine, biting into a lemon, what that does to your mouth. It's something that you never want to experience again. And I also asked for a hidden gem, something that might make your flying safer. So here is a hidden gem from 20,000-hour American Airlines. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. Zip, major airlines captain and Cessna owner. He says, never change your minimums for a single flight. Because if you change your minimums for a single flight, they aren't really minimums, are they? And will fudge. It's human nature to want to fudge and be sneaky and say, hey, I can do that. He suggests that since we're looking at our landing currency every 90 days, then maybe we look at our minimums every 90 days as well. All right. So you're going to see me landing in the Norseman in just about a minute. I want you to consider the airplane that you're flying, whether it's one that you own or one that you're renting or borrowing. Chances are you have not flown as much as normal in the past 18 months. So check things like your hoses, battery, fuel lines, all those things. Make sure that you don't have some mice that have been dining on your wiring or made a nice little nest. Your mechanic that you use, they might not have been working very much over the past 18 months. And remember, some of those FBOs, they might have newer people that are doing fueling. So in regard to your airplane, you're going to want to make sure that what you're flying is very sound and safe. Also, in regard to the airplane, you're going to be considering things like, what is your personal minimum on your crosswind component? And maybe you'll compare that to what the pilot operating handbook says. So it might say 12 knots, and your personal minimum might be a little different, depending on runway length, conditions, all that sort of thing. So when you're thinking about your personal guidelines, you have to think about the airplane that you're in. Okay, so here are some quotes that I got from these wonderful people that I spoke to regarding minimums for the airplane. One gentleman that I spoke to said that he must land with 1 hour and 3/4 of fuel. That is his minimum. He will not budge on that. Another said that their crosswind limit from the pilot operating handbook, it was a female Mooney pilot, was 11, but she knew she could do better, but not on a shorter runway. And one of my favorites is this quote about the Perrier bottle, that if you land for fuel, this pilot will not leave without getting it. So if the card reader's down, if the tanks are dry, if there's something going on, he will not leave. If it's a flight that he needs that fuel, he said, I'll have it delivered in bottles if I have to. Okay, we're going to switch gears to, as a professional psychotherapist, it's a little bit more my realm, which are pilot factors. Okay, you remember that you're not special, but your mother loves you, right? So we've been through a lot, haven't we, in 2020? It's been a difficult time for us, and so we have to consider some of the psychological aspects or stress aspects on the pilot population. You might have general health concerns, some financial concerns. We might have some grief going on. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about stress, compassion fatigue, and burnout. And I want you to ask yourself, and I know it sounds kind of stark, and again, I know maybe you won't like everything I say, but you have to ask yourself, is this flight worth my life? If my son or daughter's a pilot, or my grandchild's a pilot, would I have them be making this flight? Because the rules apply to us, and I want to see all of you here in 2022. I want to talk a little bit about stress and compassion fatigue and burnout. Stress. Most of you know what I'm saying when I say stress. We have an increased heart rate, we might have more tension, and it really feels like we're revved up. And when you're thinking about stress, it feels more like anxiety. So sometimes in session, people will say they're anxious. They don't really have anxious symptoms, but it's stress, and stress feels like anxiety. So you have to watch your stress level. Let me ask you all a question and be honest. How many of you think that flying relieves stress? Okay, you're being honest. I love it. Now, if I asked you all whether you floss every day, the answer might not be so honest. But yeah, a lot of people say that, you know, they can go and have a sunset flight or go out and they really have some stress relief. And that works for mild stress, but for moderate or severe stress, that does not apply, so be careful with that. Compassion fatigue is something different. That is when it almost hurts to care. We've been maybe taking care of somebody who's sick, or we've had loss in our life due to the pandemic or some other illness. And compassion fatigue has a way of just winding us down. and it almost hurts our heart to care. So I just wanted to point that out because it is pretty appropriate in the times that we're living in. Now, burnout, you might think job burnout. Why are we talking about burnout? Burnout isn't just jobs, it can be relationships too. And one thing that we've learned during the pandemic is that, maybe we always had to go to Aunt Bertha's house for Thanksgiving, and the pandemic has given us a wonderful excuse not to go anymore. So with burnout, we can have some relationships that need to be changed. In the job sense, it's typically when our values and the job's values are a bit divergent, we feel that sense of burnout. And it can look like emotional exhaustion. What I want you to know about burnout is you're gonna feel wound down. Burnout feels more like depression. Stress feels more like anxiety. So with stress, you're more likely to have fight, flight, and freeze. That is controlled by the amygdala, that very ancient part of our brain that we share with reptiles. So when we're stressed out, we're more likely to make a decision that is based on fight, flight, or freeze. Those are not things that we want to have in the airplane. Okay. I kind of wish I looked like her. As PIC, you are in control of every aspect of your aircraft environment. And so I'm going to play a little video for you, and it's about maintaining perspective, how I started off with you're not special, and the rules apply to you. I just want you to take a gander at this video and see about this lady's perspective.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking?
So what did we see about her perspective? You know, all my sweaters are snagged and I can't sleep. It's hard to see ourselves in space. My dad was an aviator. He was a trainer in World War II and the steerman at Rankin Field in Tulare, California. He flew with Sammy Mason and Tex Rankin. And he passed away unexpectedly in 2015. And about a week after his death, I was talking with my friend Jan Maxwell, and I said, I wonder if I'm okay to fly. If you ever ask yourself, I wonder if I'm okay to fly, what's the answer? You're not. She's from Texas. She teaches the Right Seat Ready Companion Seminar with me. She says, Jolie, if you get in that airplane, I'm flying from Texas, and I'm gonna put my boot in your bottom. So we need to maintain that perspective. So here's another hidden gem from a PC-12 pilot, a pro pilot. He said that he was flying along in a two-pilot operation, and his father had died, and then his relationship went south, and he had another person die. And he was up there, and he said to himself, you know, what am I doing up here? I shouldn't be flying. I'm not 100%. So here's somebody that had the ability in the plane to say that, but it would have been nice if it was on the ground where it's safer. Here's another one. This is one of the student pilots that I talked to who said that he underestimated fatigue. And he was very tired and worked all day and then had an instrument lesson. And he's found that the fatigue just kicked him in the rear. He just couldn't focus, and that was something that he would never do again. Another pilot said, I am the most important thing in the equation. If I don't feel 100%, I'm not going to go. So again, I want you to be able to pull yourself out and see yourself in space. Freud called it our observing ego. It's the part of us that kind of pulls out like a camera to look at yourself and see how you're really doing. Like right now, you all are droopy. I should make you stand up and dance or something. But we're going to switch now to talking about the environment. And I'm keenly aware that we have two types of environments that we are in charge of as pilots. We have our strategic environment. That is where we are on the ground and we are doing our planning using all of the wonderful tools that we have. And then we have the tactical environment. And so you can see the beautiful 1942 Norseman on the slide that I was lucky to be able to fly into Oshkosh in. And it was interesting because I had done all my planning as if I was going to be flying my Mooney, and then I ended up in the right seat of that beautiful airplane. Okay, so strategic environment, when you're looking at your minimums, are you going to go somewhere without planning? Are you going to go somewhere without checking the NOTAMs? Would you ever depart not knowing what the weather is? So your strategic planning is using all available tools, to look at your terrain, what's going on with your runway analysis of your destination airport, and what facilities are there for you when you get there. A lot of airports right now are having fuel difficulties. I know in California, some small airports, and in Oregon and Washington, where they would normally have fuel, they don't have fuel. So that's something that you would be checking in your strategic environment. That's UPS. Okay. Does anybody recognize that picture of the radar? I thought this would just be so wonderful to have. So our tactical environment, and that's actually my lap with my iPad and my notebook on it. People make fun of me that I fly with a notebook, but it's almost like a memory book for me too. So when we're in the air, it's the tactical environment that you're in charge of. Everything's changing, the weather, the wind. Maybe you ate a bad fish stick at Artie and Ed's. Not at Artie and Ed's, somewhere along the way coming here to Oshkosh, and you're not feeling well. So we have the strategic environment in which we need to have minimums, and then the tactical environment. So you're up in Mother Nature, you're in that airplane, you're headed there, and things start to change. This is where you have to have flexibility. You have to have the ability to pull out from your strategic planning and say, is this plan going to work for me now? This is a great quote from our 20,000-hour pilot. He flies in a day VFR plane only to get to some of his gigs. And what he wanted was always to have 1,500 feet on the altimeter. If he didn't have that kind of clearance from clouds or overcast, he was going to turn around. But you know what happened? It was 1,500, then it's just 1450. Well, then it's just 1400. And as humans, what we do, we want to close that circuit, so we just say, oh, it's just 50 feet. It's just 25 feet. And that's called normalization of deviance. Don't do it. Okay. Are you ready to hear some puckers? So these are folks that allowed me to videotape them so that we can learn about their pucker factors. And I know if I were to ask all of you if you have a pucker factor, you would go, oh yeah, I do. So let's see. Okay, this is Captain Mike Jesh.
I'm Mike Jesh, and here's my pucker factor situation. I was flying on my way back from Oshkosh a couple years ago from Wayne, Nebraska, back to Southern California, and our goal for the day was to land in Grand Junction, Colorado. Now, this was late afternoon on a late July day on the way home from Oshkosh, and there was weather starting to pop over the Colorado mountains, the Rocky Mountains. And so we knew this was going to be a little bit of a sticky situation. And my passenger, who was also a flight instructor, a fairly high-time pilot, and I made a few decisions ahead of time before we got underway. We knew that we were going to be flying into this weather, and we knew that we were going through the mountains and weather isn't always a very good situation. So the first decision point we established was at Boulder, Colorado. And we determined there that our plan A, of course, is our original destination in mind, which was Grand Junction. Our plan B would be Fort Collins, Colorado, and I had a friend who lived there who had offered to put us up for the night. So this is what I would call a solid gold plan B. And then we set another one later on that I'll get to in a moment. So we flew across western Nebraska and northeastern Colorado and into Boulder. And as we were approaching the Rollins Pass just west of Boulder, we came to our first decision point. And the criteria that we had established were that we needed to be able to see clearly to the other side of the mountain range and make sure that we could then get to the other side safely and be legal and safe on the way. And if not, then we would instantly turn around. And so we get to Boulder, and that's exactly the situation we found. We had to deviate around a little bit of weather, but when we got to the pass, we could clearly see the other side of the pass. The ceilings were great, and the visibility was great, so we continued on. And we followed the mountain roads again down toward Eagle, Colorado, which was our second major decision point. And the plan C was to land at Eagle if we couldn't continue. And again, our minimum weather requirements were that we be able to see the continued route along I-70 over toward Rifle and then on into Grand Junction. And if not, then we would land at Eagle and spend the night there. So as we proceeded down, I forget which freeway it was, but we get to Eagle and everything looked good. So we continued along toward Rifle and then followed the road down toward Grand Junction. And this all worked out great. So I like to avoid pucker factor type situations, and the key to surviving a pucker factor situation is to identify your options early and identify what your minimum parameters are going to be when you get to the point where you have to make these decisions. And when you set it up like this, you're not in the air trying to figure out what your options are. You already know what your options are, and then it's just a simple matter to make the choice of door A or door B. And with these options and with the parameters clearly defined, there's no guesswork, there's no gray area. The decision is either A or B, and you move along your way. And that's exactly as it worked out. Our flight visibility did get a little bit low between Rifle and Grand Junction, but we were legal and we were safe at all times, and we always kept an open door to good weather. So if you're ever faced with a pucker factor situation, hopefully first thing you can identify that you're entering this situation early. And then you can explore your options, determine what your options are, and establish your set of criteria that you're going to need to meet to make. And then you have to be willing to execute on that. When you get to that point, if you don't see the conditions that are going to work for you, you have to make that decision right then to turn around. There's not going to be any time for waffling or trying to figure something out at that point. You should already have made those decisions. So I hope this helps you maintain your safety in your future flying should you ever be faced with a pucker factor situation. Make the best of it, plan ahead, think ahead, make your decisions, and be willing to make them.
So that's an area where the strategic planning was very good, and the tactical part in the air They had their head on a swivel. And as he said, there were 2 licensed pilots in the plane. I don't know how many of you fly with another licensed pilot frequently. Sometimes, not often. There weren't very many hands. So it really becomes the pilot that's having to be flexible and use the top part of our brain that we do not share with reptiles that allows us to make good decisions. So this is a pucker factor that a Mooney pilot did. He was going into his home airport of Henderson, Nevada, and what he was doing was he was scud running under a layer to get to Henderson. You can see on this sectional where the red arrow is pointing. He says, I was flying through rising terrain and lowering ceilings, and I was scud running into the Las Vegas area. I was crossing a hill to stay below the ceiling and following an interstate that goes right through that gap. He recognized as he was right in the gap that he had no other options than to go forward. So don't put yourself in a situation. That's what I mean by the alligator's mouth. How far can you put your head in the alligator's mouth and before it's going to get bit and you can't get it out?
Hi, my name is JJ Greenway. I wanted to tell you about a tight spot I got myself into flying that ranks right up there in my 5 top tight spots, I suppose you could say, that I've gotten myself into in 40 years of professional flying. It was a little more than 20 years ago, January 16th, 1998. I was a captain on the MD-80, and I was not new to the aviation. I had nearly 9,200 hours total time and had been flying for 25 years or so. I was scheduled to fly between Dallas-Fort Worth and Portland, Oregon. Last flight of the day, Flight 347. Beautiful evening. Texas was completely clear. The Rocky Mountains were clear. It was even clear on the west side of the Cascades in Portland. And terminal area forecast for every station along the way was clear skies. Winds were rather benign, less than 10 knots. Beautiful evening for flying. We proceeded uneventfully out of DFW. We were completely full, 142 passengers, and we had full fuel, not full fuel, but enough fuel for our alternate and legal reserves. We checked in with Fort Worth Center and it became evident right away that the rides at our filed altitude were very poor. We were filed in the low 30s, and we were right away hearing complaints from airliners and anyone else that was up in the 30 to 40,000 foot range that the rides were moderate chop to moderate turbulence. And it was a nearly 4-hour flight, and I didn't want to subject the passengers to that. So I consulted with a dispatcher on the radio, and we agreed that we could cut into our alternate fuel because we did not legally need an alternate, and we could cruise at a lower altitude burning much more fuel and still have enough fuel to be legal when we got to Portland. We requested and received flight level 220 and proceeded up across the Rocky Mountains under a nearly full moon, and it was a beautifully smooth ride. It was a fasten seatbelt sign was off for the entire trip. We could see the snow-capped peaks over the Rockies in the full moon, and it was a rather enjoyable trip. We started our descent up just west of Baker City, Oregon, and we could see the lights of Portland coming into view. The controller came on when we were about 45 miles out of Portland and said that it looked like there was a severe thunderstorm coming up overhead the field, and 2 flights ahead of us had gone missed approach, and what were our intentions. Looking at our fuel, taking a quick glance at it, we really didn't have much choice. We couldn't hold and wait it out. I didn't feel like we had enough fuel to shoot the approach, miss the approach, and then go to an alternate. So we decided right away to request a diversion to Seattle, about 30 minutes north of Portland. So we headed right towards Seattle. We were cleared, and we flew up. Good visibility in Seattle. It was raining as usual. Ceilings were decent. We did the ILS approach and landed uneventfully on runway 16 right in Seattle. Landed with 38 minutes of fuel on board, which still bothers me to think about, let alone talk about in public. That's a lot less fuel than I would like to land with in any airplane. Lesson learned for me, though, was that we always have to plan for the unexpected. Airports close because of weather. They close because of wind being out of limits. I had an airport in Mexico close on me when I was on the approach because there was a severe earthquake and they weren't sure of the capability of the runway, if the runway had been cracked or damaged in any way. Flying in Southeast Asia several years ago, I encountered an airport that closed because of political reasons during a regime change. Disabled aircraft on the runway has closed airports that I was inbound to and made me divert to another airport. So I think we always have to plan for the unexpected, even when things look really good, with a forecast that's completely clear and winds that are calm, like I had in Portland, Oregon that night. When I cut my fuel down that far, in retrospect, I probably should have taken an altitude that was uncomfortable in the low 30s and been up there suffering with everyone else and landed with, or at least arrived over the Portland area with a lot more fuel than I arrived with. So, lesson learned for me, I vowed to never get myself into a situation like that again, but I also vowed to always plan for the unexpected when I'm flying. I hope you do the same.
Am I on? There we go. What a story, right? That you've got 100 and some odd passengers on board and you land and you have 35 minutes of fuel on board. Do any of you in the audience not have a red door prize ticket? Sky Chick, keep your hands raised so that she can come and give you a ticket for the door prizes. So the next pucker factor is from a designated pilot examiner. He was on his way to a check ride, and you'll see the sectional there in front of you is in the Portland, Oregon area, and he was going into a little field called Pearson that is in Vancouver. And what he was trying to do was skirt around Portland's airspace and sort of come in from the northwest in that notch. And what he did was he had minimums as far as his ceiling. And he went down 50 feet from his minimums, and then he went down 100 feet from his minimums, and he landed and he thought, what sort of example is this for my applicant? For the student that was there to have a designated pilot examiner fudging on the minimums. Now he says if the ceilings don't cooperate, he drives or schedules for another day. So we can do something that's kind of silly in the airplane once, but don't repeat it again. And again, I want you to remember to make these decisions with that lovely front part of your brain that allows you to see options like A, B, C, or D. It's not just fight, flight, or freeze. If we were to freeze in the airplane, it's what our brain does. It's not literally like our body freezes, but our brain goes on freeze. Think of when we put a DVD on pause. The brain just checks out. We don't have the higher function that we need as pilots. So again, don't allow that deviance of normalization of deviance where we're just letting ourselves go down and down and down. Make it a fixed thing. All right, we have another video from Brian Schiff, and he's also a captain of a major airline.
Hi, my name is Brian Schiff. Back when I was in college, a friend and I were asked if we could ferry a Cessna 310 from Tulsa, Oklahoma to San Jose, California. This would involve missing a few days of class, but we were very eager to get the extra 8 to 10 hours of multi-engine time in our logbooks, so we agreed to do it. This also meant missing a class that was Human Factors 101. Ironically, we learned more about human factors in this 2 days of flying the Cessna 310 than we ever would in a semester-long class. As we were flying westbound, an eastbound cold front was racing us to the Rocky Mountains. We all the pressure to get as quickly as we could, trying to get us there.
Oh my God. Okay, so much for my strategic planning. You know, I only have 3 out of the 5 characteristics of OCD, just so you know. Like, I've got this presentation on 5 different drives. What am I gonna do? Okay, so this is tactical now. What do I spy with my left eye? Captain Brian Schiff is here to tell us his pucker factor.
Always have a backup plan, right? Leave yourself an out. So there we were, flying this Cessna 310, my college friend and I, who I happen to notice is right in the back of the room. And that was like 10 years ago when we were in college. Why don't they believe that?
I don't know. I'm 22 in my head.
So for this aircraft owner who just bought this aircraft, he wanted us to ferry it for him, and we're young fledgling pilots trying to build up our multi-engine time. So we agreed to do it. We hightailed it out to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We'd get this airplane back, and we'd fly a 310 back to the Bay Area in California in 2 days. Absolutely, no problem. We got this. We could do it. And as I started mentioning in the video before it failed, we were racing a cold front to the Rockies. Cold front coming from the west, we're coming from the east, and we were hustling, pressured by that cold front and the weathers to get to the Rockies and get to California before this weather hit. So not only did we fly very long days and avoid having maintenance issues fixed in the airplane, or getting medication for headaches, or even nourishing ourselves, you could say, if you're familiar with the PAVE checklist, that we violated the P, the A, the V, the E, everything, and high altitude flight over the Rockies without oxygen at night, 1 generator. I had no personal minimums. All I wanted to do was build multi-engine time, the both of us did. And we made some very poor decisions. And when you get to a point when you're flying over the mountains at night with no moon and up and down drafts because the westerly flow is so strong that you're no longer in radar coverage, and ATC says, we've lost radar contact because you're too low. Below my radar coverage, squawk 1200, have a good day. Good day? No, we wanted to stay with ATC, but they couldn't get us on radio. They couldn't see us on radar. And at the same time, the same kind of radio is what we were using for VOR navigation. We could not receive that. So we were dead reckoning between the mountain peaks at night, in turbulence, with headaches, malnourished, fatigued. And then we saw the lights of Tonopah, Nevada. Never before did a place look so welcoming. And never before have Tonopah and welcoming been said in the same sentence. But we landed there and kissed the ground, and we're very glad to have made it and vowed never to do that again. So personal minimums regarding the airplane working and everything operational and getting that fixed, to getting enough sleep, to getting enough to eat, to not flying when we have a headache. And we never did that again. I never did that again. And we both learned quite a bit from that. We were lucky enough to survive it. It was very foolish. And that was the alligator's mouth that I will never climb back into.
Thank you. What a fabulous story. Thank you so much. Are you going to be our Vanna White later?
I would love to be Vanna White.
Okay, he's going to be Vanna White for the door prize.
Would you believe 15 years ago if I said that? No.
I keep wondering how I have a 36-year-old daughter.
Yeah. So this college flight, in all honesty, was about 33 years ago. 33 years ago. And I've never broken those rules since.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. And just maybe step down there and we'll get the door prizes going in just a second. If anybody would like one of these personal minimum checklist card, I'm going to maybe, if you could pass them around. I'm not sure if I have enough. Does anybody else need a red coupon for the door prize? If so, raise your hand. Nope. So, in conclusion, we're going to put a ring on it, right? We're going to take that extra step to write our minimums down. When we put something in writing, we codify it. All major things in life, we have them written down. So write them down and commit yourself to always, always flying your minimums. They can be adjusted as you have experience in different type planes, but always, always fly it.